Good evening, everyone. Welcome aboard for our Neighbourhood Battery webinar this evening. I'm Natalie Bucknell. I'm the Chair of Clean Energy Nillumbik and really excited to have this session tonight. Rob is driving the slides for me. So Rob, could you please move to the next slide? Just want to highlight, as you would have noticed, we're recording this session tonight and recording has started. I'll just quickly kick off with our acknowledgement of the amazing, beautiful country that we are fortunate to occupy here in Nillumbik. So we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which most of us are meeting today, the Wurundjeri of the Kulin Nation. So we recognise their continued connection to the land and waters of this very beautiful place, and we acknowledge the care that's been given to country for many, many years, and that they never ceded sovereignty. We'd like to pay our respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to all First Nations people who might be with us today. So the program for this evening is we've got 3 speakers for you. After I'm going to give you a brief overview, take this opportunity to get in your ear about Clean Energy Nillumbik and give you a brief overview about our organisation. Then we're going to hear from Kate Clark from DELP, Rob Catchlove from Wave Consulting, Gary Hocking from AusNet, and then Benji Lee is going to run question time for us. So if you have questions as we go, please type them into the Q&A. There's 2 areas where you can participate. There's the chat and there's the Q&A. So where possible, please put your questions in the Q&A, and then Benji will raise them during question time. So moving right along to about Clean Energy Nillumbik. Rob, if we could do the next slide, please. Thank you. So Clean Energy Nillumbik is a volunteer community organisation that consists of local residents and business owners, and our purpose is to help achieve 100% of Nillumbik's buildings being powered by renewable energy as soon as possible. And increasingly with electrification of transport, that's becoming part of our objective as well. So our strategy is to achieve this through providing information and engagement programs for the community, by providing opportunities to reduce energy demand, because energy efficiency is actually the cheapest and most accessible form of renewable energy. We want to facilitate rooftop solar and other small-scale technologies. We'd love to support and facilitate large-scale renewable energy sources for Nillumbik, whether they're within our shire or outside of it. And also, the big challenging one is supporting households and businesses to move away from gas, because gas is not renewable. So obviously we need everyone on board for this, and if you've got any interest in volunteering on one of our events or in some other way to support us, then we'd love to hear from you, and you can get in touch via our website. Next one, please, Rob. Just to highlight a couple of our events and activities that we've got coming up. So we're currently running 2 bulk purchase programs, a reverse cycle air conditioning bulk purchase and heat pump hot water system bulk purchase program. We've got an Expo, Clean Energy Expo, coming up in April next year at Edendale Farm. There's going to be an EV display, children's activities, and heaps of great information and some live music and food as well. So look out for that one. All of these are completely free to participate. We're running Sustainable House Day live face-to-face, assuming that COVID restrictions don't get us again with that one. So please put that date in your diary, the 1st of May, to visit homes that have got sustainable features. And we're also putting in an appearance at Eltham Farmers Market, often on the first Sunday of each month. So that's a good time if you like to cruise past and have a chat. Also just want to highlight Nillumbik Shire Council's running the Solar Savers program, which is a bulk purchase of rooftop solar. So if you haven't got rooftop solar and you're interested in it, that's worth checking out. Thanks, Rob. And now we're onto the interesting bit of the webinar to talk about neighbourhood batteries. And we're so excited to be running this program. It's funded by DELP, and we've teamed up with Wave Consulting to do a feasibility on neighbourhood batteries within Nillumbik. So it's really exciting to have this program, this project up and running. And I'll hand over to Kate now so that she can give you a bit more background about the Neighbourhood Battery Initiative program. Just a heads up, so Kate Clark is a program manager for the Neighbourhood Battery Initiative, and for more than 20 years she's worked across the public and non-profit sectors to support the development and implementation of environmentally sustainable practices, including renewable energy. So she's enthusiastic about the role batteries can play in Victoria's affordable and equitable clean energy future, and I can vouch for that. She's been a really staunch supporter of our project. Over to you, Kate.
I'll just get my screen working. Hopefully you can see my presentation now. Okay, well, I'm very happy to be speaking to you all tonight. As Natalie said, I'm the program manager for the Neighbourhood Battery Initiative, work within DELP, which is the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning within the Victorian Government. So I want to give you a quick overview of what the Neighbourhood Battery Initiative, or I will refer to it as the NBI, because it's really quite long to say, and why the government is funding it. So the NBI was announced by Minister D'Ambrosio, who's the Minister for Energy, Environment and Climate Change, in February of this year, 2021. And the NBI has a number of objectives, including supporting the understanding of the full range of benefits that neighbourhood scale batteries can provide. We want to help to overcome some of the barriers that might exist to the deployment of neighbourhood batteries. Informing regulatory reform. So are there any changes that we need to make to allow people to install neighbourhood batteries? And determine which methods of neighbourhood battery deployment provide the most benefit to the Victorian electricity system, as well as supporting the decarbonisation of Victoria's electricity system to tackle climate change. So the NBI is just one of the many ways that supports the Victorian government's commitment to transition to a net zero emissions future. So when it was announced, the Minister actually announced $3 million of funding, made that available, but we had 33 applications and they were of such quality, the Minister actually decided to allocate $3.68 million towards neighbourhood batteries. And these, the applications we received covered both the metro and regional areas and quite a range of organisations. So that 3.68 million was funding for 16 projects. And they were in two streams. So there was stream one, which was for feasibility projects and business case development. There were 13 of those. And there were 3 stream 2 projects, which were more of the implementation projects and the shovel-ready projects. So Clean Energy Nillumbik was a recipient of stream 1 study funding for a feasibility study. And I think what DELP and the Minister really liked about Clean Energy Nillumbik's application was its strong community focus, with putting community engagement really at the forefront of their feasibility study. So why are we interested in neighbourhood batteries? Well, these batteries can deliver a whole range of benefits to customers, communities, and the electricity system. So as you'll see on this slide, some of these benefits include the opportunity for more local solar generation and storage. So some of you perhaps may have solar at the moment, but your exports are constrained, and neighbourhood batteries are one way of reducing those constraints. They also provide cost-saving benefits by avoiding network upgrades by installing network support. So it might save on things like upgrading transformers on the network. They also provide more equitable access to local renewable energy. So if you're perhaps a renter and you're not in a position to put on solar panels and your landlord won't put on solar panels, how do you get access to local solar, to local renewable energy? And you can do so by accessing a neighbourhood battery. It also applies to apartment buildings and other areas where you just can't put on solar. They also improve the reliability in areas that are prone to electricity outages, and they provide cheaper electricity bills by the fact that renewable energy tends to be cheaper. So that's, I'll keep it nice, short and sweet. So I will be taking questions along with the rest of the panel during the question and answer session tonight. And if you think of any questions after this session, you're more than welcome to email me and my team at neighbourhood.batteries@delp.vic.gov. And I will put that email address in the Q&A section or in the chat section. So I'll pass across to Rob Catchlove from Wave Consulting. So he's the director of Wave Consulting and founder of Hackman Street Energy, which is a community energy group. So Rob works on a range of sustainability projects in both Melbourne, Sydney, Canberra and Adelaide, and has a special focus on innovative water and community energy projects. Rob has been working with Clean Energy Nillumbik for the past 3 years, I think, in supporting their vision for 100% of Nillumbik's buildings to be powered by renewable energy by 2028. Rob, do you want to I'll stop sharing?
Thanks, Kate.
Great.
And I've just put my slides up here as well. So my name's Rob Catchlove. I'm working with Clean Energy Nillumbik. And my job for the next 5-10 minutes is to really try to help explain the project. What are we talking about in terms of neighbourhood batteries? So let's get stuck into it. And so when we refer to a neighbourhood battery, there's a couple of key things that differentiate this type of infrastructure and why we're sort of so interested in considering the feasibility of installing them in Nillumbik versus batteries that are at the really big end scale. And so one was recently turned on the other day, the Victorian big battery, and the batteries that you can put on at home. So I guess we're kind of expecting that a lot of people online tonight are very obviously aware and interested in this transition to a renewable energy future, very interested in renewable energy, but contemplating what the role of a neighbourhood battery may be and whether that might potentially replace needing a battery at your place. So what this battery is doing, I guess, is a couple of key elements to when we talk about neighbourhood batteries. We're referring to a battery that would be in front of the meter. And so from a grid perspective, in terms of the way electricity works, if you put something at home and electricity is accounted for by going through your electricity meter, we refer to that as being behind the meter. It has a very different accounting structure. So what you pay for when electrons are traveling around your home from your solar panels to your appliances and so on, you're not being charged for network charges and all sorts of other things. But this battery we're talking about is going to be in front of the meter. Therefore, we're referring to batteries being out in the street, in parks, substations, all these kind of things. So it's essentially it's part of the grid infrastructure. But it's agnostic. I just want to sort of stress here that it is agnostic to where those electrons come from. So there clearly is a value proposition, or we expect that there's a value proposition here for putting neighbourhood batteries in that can absorb a lot of extra solar generated from householders during the day, and then be charged up and feed that back at night. But it's not to say that electrons from non-renewable energy sources may also be part of that sort of transaction and the flow of electrons and electricity. The battery itself, we imagine batteries as pretty simple little bits of infrastructure, but at a neighbourhood scale, there's a whole lot of other things that come along with it. In particular, there's software, I guess, that kind of manages tells the battery when it should be charging and discharging. Okay, you don't leave it up to the infrastructure itself. So that's sort of fairly well regulated and managed. And there's a whole lot of other things. So the safety systems that go along around it, even air conditioning, the temperature of the battery is very, very important in terms of how it performs. It would be subject to a lot of regulation around what Energy Safe Victoria require. We're very aware that people are quite interested in what a neighbourhood batteries could be, but there are also, people raise sort of various risks. Are they going to be noisy? Are they going to emit electromagnetic radiation? Will they catch fire? These kind of things. So those sort of issues are, very well considered, and we need to kind of consider them as we go and comply with what Energy Safe Victoria require. In terms of the scale of the battery itself, I guess if you put a battery in at home today, then it would be in the order of around about 10 kilowatt hours in terms of its capacity, its size. So we're nominally talking about a battery that maybe is around 25 times bigger than something you would put in a home. It's far smaller than the grid scale batteries that, as we said, were kind of commissioned down in Geelong the other day. But if we think about this as a size of battery that maybe would cater for 10 to 100 people, I've said up to a few hundred sort of here. So that sort of tries to give you some sense on what this battery actually is. But what does it really look like in practice? So here are a couple of examples, real examples. This one on the left is what we refer to as a pole-mounted battery. And so that's actually going in down Mornington Peninsula area. It's useful to put something on a pole because it's so close, enables us to connect it very easily into the poles and wires. So all these batteries need to connect to the poles and wires. So that's kind of really, really useful to kind of do it like that. It's off the street itself, doesn't impact on the footpath and the verge and all those kind of different things. Obviously, you need special infrastructure to come in and maintain it, but there's limitations, obviously, in terms of how big that can be because it's got to sit on top of the pole structurally. Here's another one in the middle, which Yarra Energy Foundation are in the process of that. That's a concept. It looks very real, but that is one example of putting it into the street verge, median strip area. The one on the top right is an example of a battery that's gone in Sydney that Ausgrid are putting in, and the one on the bottom right is something that has gone in Perth. So in terms of the size, like I kind of, the best way to explain this to people is sort of like it's like a mini shed. It's definitely less than a shipping container. But one of the kind of key things, and what we're quite interested in hearing from you guys on tonight, and some of the questions and feedback is the location. Where should it go? But also there's a whole lot of opportunity here in terms of how it integrates into the neighborhood itself. What color is it? You know, what shape is it? Exactly sort of whereabouts does it go? But we have to acknowledge, in terms of doing the work that we want to do here to find a feasible site in Nillumbik, is that there are trade-offs. So if we find the perfect site, but it is 500 meters from the nearest poles and wires, pole to connect the battery to, then we'll find that the majority of the costs will actually be entrenching and connecting the battery. So there's a trade-off here in terms of finding the right location and maximizing the value. So a lot of people are particularly interested in this, but the economics of this are not simple. And these figures I just put up here now is really, you know, as I said in my little footnote here, is that they're quite conceptual, but I really wanted to kind of highlight there's quite a significant difference in the way how much it costs to put the battery in, but how much return you get from that battery. If we put something in at home, maybe it's in $10,000 to $15,000 worth of putting that battery in the infrastructure. And the money you get back from that is the money you save from buying it at a retail price. But you don't have to pay any network charges, but you also don't get access to any income that's what we refer to as the frequency market. So you don't get anything there. If we go into the neighborhood and try this, we do get some efficiencies in the actual capital, but we then also potentially need to pay for some other parts of the infrastructure, as I said, in terms of connection and safety systems, and planning, you know, applications and the rest of it. So we're starting to work at a higher rate in terms of what it's we're able to earn, because we're looking at the retail price, but we also then need to start thinking about what it's going to cost, because that those kilowatt hours are subject to network charges as well. And Gary's going to follow me, and you know, AusNet have a very important role in thinking about how this sort of infrastructure rolls out in Nillumbik and generally. At a particular size of battery, it's not quite big enough to earn income on the frequency market. If we were to go a little bit bigger, we need a lot more capital to put that battery in, and the same sort of you know, costs and income would apply. But if it's at a certain scale, then the battery actually can generate income from the frequency market as well. So there's all sorts of different permutations to this. As I kind of said, the actual capital cost is not just the subject cost of the battery itself. There's things like the trenching, the connection fees, and all those sort of other things. To sort of boil this down in terms of what does it mean on a day-to-day basis for an individual, generally, people in Victoria are paying, give or take, around about $3 a day for their electricity. And that includes all sorts of different things that go into your bill. Those network charges I just referred to then are included in that, as long with the wholesale price of the power itself. So we see this, I guess, as the opportunity to say, well, to what degree can we save on your electricity bill and maybe reinvest that in the battery? And maybe if that was in the order of, sort of 33% or more, half of that average price that you're paying every day, then we can kind of translate that and say over a 10-year period, well, that's probably the equivalent of an investment that you earn back through the battery over a 10-year period of $3,000 or $4,000. So as you can kind of see, this kind of idea that we could potentially do things more efficiently compared to putting in your own battery, which, as I said, is around the $10,000 to $15,000, then these are the kind of things we're trying to weigh up. And this is what goes into ultimately saying, can we find a feasible site and make the financing, the economics of this work? And then we're kind of ready to go, assuming we've also got really strong community support. But the fact that we're getting a whole lot of people logging onto these kind of sessions, we're really confident that there is a community demand. Who benefits? Well, as Kate alluded to, there's all sorts of different users. We're particularly hoping that it's any electricity user, the whole community can participate. It's not, we're not going down the path. We want to see this as a proposition that if you have solar, then yes, you can participate. You can buy into this sort of system and potentially even make money out of this sort of system. We're hoping that it's open to all sorts of different users in Nillumbik, and obviously who benefits, AusNet benefit too in terms of the management of the grid and reliability. And I'm going to finish here, but I just wanted to flag that there's so many other questions that go on into this proposition of putting a neighbourhood battery in. We just wanted to flag that we're aware of all sorts of different complexities to this. But, we're going to work really hard over the next few months to go from this position we're in, which we're kind of trying to say, what is the concept, through to, as Kate alluded to, the fact that there are projects around the state right now that are more shovel ready, and to what degree we can kind of move this project into that space of being shovel ready. So thank you. And I'm just going to pass the baton across to Gary now. So Gary is at AusNet and as I said, very important stakeholder and participant in this project. Gary is actually the community engagement manager, and he has a wealth of experience in the distributors and all sorts of engineering and management of the grid questions, and look forward to hearing from him, and then we'll all be around for some questions. So over to you, Gary.
Thank you, Rob, and good evening, everyone. When we were asked about this project, we did some research. We looked into it. We came up with 3 substations that are potential for viewing. 2 were in Eltham, 1 was in research. A couple of them have got, if you like, mixed customers on it. There's some commercial customers and some retail customers on it. The other 2 are more in the residential areas. What we look for when we're looking at the substations, a reasonable solar penetration onto the substation, somewhere around the 80% mark. And then we look at a substation which has a reasonable capacity and is not fully loaded, but there again, something around the 70-odd% usage mark. So those are a couple of the criteria that we look at. Also, the other areas that we've considered are, where does the street circuits go? So where will the battery be located? Is it, one of them I think is probably not ideal. It's out in the middle of the traders area. So right in the middle of the public eye. I thought, well, maybe that's not the best, but then the community has to decide some of these things. The others are in residential areas and down side streets. So looking at the network that the battery will support is one of the key things that we have to do once some final decisions are made. But at the moment, it's still up in the air, as are some of the regulations around how batteries are installed, who owns them, who operates them. They're all questions that still need to be answered. So I'll leave it there because I dare say some questions might come in on the chat, which I'd rather allow us more time to answer those. So I'll hand back, and if you've got any questions, please pop them in the chat. I'd love to answer them for you.
Thanks very much, Gary, and thank you to Rob and Kate as well for giving up your time to spend time with all of us today. My name's Benji Lee. I'm helping out Clean Energy Nillumbik. I used to run energy policy for an energy utility called Gemini, which is also a network business, for about 10 years. But yeah, do my own consulting work now, and I'm assisting Clean Energy Nillumbik around their Battery Champions group, which we'll be sort of bringing together in February next year, and there'll be a day dedicated to I guess skilling people up and drawing on their skills to champion these battery projects, and also look more broadly across the Nillumbik region on what can be done in this space. But yeah, the key priority now is to get on to your questions. So, and there's some really good ones too. I've been having a little look. Some really practical ones and some big picture, so a really good mix. I'll start off with the first one, which is a really practical one. How far away from my house can the battery be for me to be able to use it? Now, I might start with Rob, maybe from Wave Consulting there, and if he needs to lean on Gary as well. What would your answer be to that question, Rob?
Yeah, good one, Benji. Thank you. So what we've been doing at the moment and looking at, as Gary alluded to, a couple of sites around Eltham and research is having a really close look at where the low voltage network is located, where we've got this, as Gary alluded to, the 70% sort of loading and a bit of extra solar. And so to answer the question around where the battery will go and how far away it would be, these sites that we're looking at are in the order of, let's call it about 300 or 400 meters, I think, in terms of the street network. So what we're doing is we're looking within this few hundred meters where we're very aware of the way the grid is, could benefit from something like a neighborhood battery, and finding the optimum place to put that battery in and connect it into that part, those poles and wires. What that would mean is there'd be some parts of the households around that area that would literally have the battery, sort of 25 meters away from them, and others a few hundred meters. But I'm not an electrical engineer, so I won't sort of dive too deeply into it, but I would suggest that from a grid perspective, it's not going to make a heap of difference to the householders that are within 20 meters versus 200 meters away. But Gary, you're more than welcome to correct me on that.
Certainly. Households need to be, if you like, connected to the substation that the battery is connected to. That's one of the key things. You might be in, I'll just pick some streets, Bible Street in Eltham, and if the substation's 14 streets away, that's not part of the network that will operate on your house. So it does have to be the electrical network that is connected to your house from the substation. So the low voltage network that is available to you, that's how you will connect into the battery. Hope that answers your question.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Rob and Gary. And I guess while we're on the technical, practical sort of things, we'll sort of whip through these questions as well of that nature. So is it possible to locate the batteries underground? Gary, did you want to have a quick go at that one?
Yes, looking at the vision that we saw earlier of the different types of battery systems, yes, I'm going to explain it in terms. A room could be built that is subterranean, and batteries could be stored in that. That is just another type of design that would have to get considered, I dare say. And location of where you put it as well. So you've got to look at, as I said, if it's in the main trading part of Eltham, where do you put an underground battery system there? I don't think there's any real estate available. So it's what you have available to you as well. So yes, it's possible, but there it takes some engineering outcomes to come up with the right answer for that one.
And Rob, or even Kate from Delp, is there anything else you want to add to that one?
I would just add, to me, this whole thing around the trade-offs. So cost immediately comes to mind. So the trade-off there is we potentially remove that asset from the landscape. So it sort of essentially disappears. But will that add to the cost? And I guess the other thing that's particularly relevant in these sort of like urban, peri-urban sort of areas is that you have so much other infrastructure underground already. You have the sewerage, the NBN, you have so many things going on. Every single project we do, we spend quite a lot of time actually trying to dive through and figure out exactly where does the gas going. You have to be very, very exact around that stuff. So I think it's a good question in terms of, does it provide some benefit and avoid some other issues by putting a battery underground? Probably does. I would, gut feel is that I can't see many of that happening, that we'd be better off trying to find better locations above ground. So gut feeling.
Kate, did you want to add anything more to that, or? No? Okay. Another practical question: does the neighbourhood battery improve the reliability of my power? Who wants to have a first go at that one?
I'll answer that one. Yes and no. Really, it doesn't sound right, but that's the best way to do it. If you're connected to the substation that the battery is supplying, the battery will absorb any excess solar capacity. When we have excess solar capacity on the network, that causes voltage rise on the network. So it will stabilise the voltage levels on that substation. So sorry about that. No, it's my phone when it rings. So that is one of the things that it will do. Hope that answers the question for you.
And I think that's a really good answer. I'll get onto this one, and I think this is an absolute doozy of a question. I really like this one. What are the pros and cons of a neighbourhood battery as opposed to signing up to a VPN, so a virtual power network? Who wants to have a first go at that? Maybe Rob or Kate even. Kate?
That's hard. I prefer Kate take this one, I reckon.
Sure.
I think it's not, you're not comparing apples with apples. I think they're different things. So, but Kate, you go.
I can answer that to a certain extent. Look, it is an excellent question, because it is the difference between having a network of home batteries, so individual homes having a batteries, and those are being connected into a virtual network, as opposed to having essentially the same volume of batteries but in one place. And look, the first up, the main difference being a con is cost. So it means that homeowners have to put up the money up front to purchase that battery, which is generally, people are getting sort of 10 kilowatt hour batteries that are about $10,000, as opposed to that cost being perhaps recovered from the neighbourhood through tariffs or through some other method for the neighbourhood battery, depending on who's picking up the bill for the neighbourhood So it's a much lower cost to be connected to a neighbourhood battery. But, you know, if you have your own battery, then you've got solar running off that and you get the feed-in tariff such as it is at the moment. So there's a range of costs and pros and cons for it. What the Victorian government is doing at the moment is testing these two options. So we also have, through Solar Homes, we have, was just announced, I think, yesterday, there's a trial of a virtual power plant. So there will be an opportunity for residents to sign up for a battery, and it will be part of a virtual, for a VPN or a virtual power network. And we're doing that in partnership with the Neighbourhood Battery Initiative to answer this very question: what are the pros and cons of them? So tune back in a year or two once we have the results of this, and we'll be able to provide more definitive answers.
That's a great answer, and you know, we're in a live experiment, aren't we? Rob, did you want to add anything else?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on, it sort of raises a sort of an interesting question in terms of where we're going with the neighbourhood battery, which is we're exploring the fact that this can be funded not just by the 25 residents that sit next to the battery. So that's kind of a really important point here, that the expectation is that if this infrastructure goes in, we want to identify what the range of benefits are, financial benefits, so that we can actually get capital contributions from a range of other stakeholders. In addition to that, as I said, we're hoping that this can benefit not just those, that's a very small group of householders, but people beyond that. And we're even exploring whether there's an opportunity here to look at donations, other investment models. So there's a really big difference here between trying to do everything yourself at your house and us looking at this as a neighbourhood battery in one of our initial sites, but then beyond that, in that we think and hope that we'll get other people engaged and invested in it. So yeah.
Well, that's a great answer, and thanks, Kate. Awesome answer too. And it's an excellent segue to the next question, which is very big picture in nature, and another excellent question, or group of questions actually. What kind of organisation is needed to plan and implement a community battery project? What skills and resources does it need? And how should it be funded to be sustainable? I think there's a strategy consultant there asking that particular question. So yeah, thank you very much for that. Look, I'll throw that one to Rob while he's on a bit of a roll and see where you get to on that.
Yeah, great. And I'll definitely need some help here from Gary and Kate. So I can't remember all of those individual questions, but let's just start with who, so who's the proponent of this thing? So the examples, those pictures that I had of those community batteries, essentially everything, the vast majority of the work that's gone in trialing community batteries or neighbourhood batteries, they're called different things around the country, is that the distributor has been the proponent. So that one I referred to down at Mornington Peninsula, that's United Energy putting that in. So they've come up with a business case internally to determine and look at the options to trial putting in that battery on a pole. So the easiest and fastest way to deliver this right now would be for the distributor to do it. So that's, Gary goes into work tomorrow and says, guess what, I've got a good idea. We're going to put in 10 of these in Nillumbik, and here's a great case to do it. And so therefore it's funded, it's paid for by the distributor, but also that therefore they get the benefits, the return on that investment. So that's the kind of base case, I guess. What we're doing with this project is sort of starting to go beyond that and say, what if there were other entities that were owning and therefore benefiting from putting in this asset in? And I'll be completely honest about that and say, we don't have that answer today, right now. We're working on it. That's what this project is kind of about. So yeah, I might stop and throw to the other guys, but I think it's a really interesting and tricky one to solve. but there are sound reasons why we don't want to rely 100% on the AusNets of the world to take up the slack and solve these kind of problems. There's a lot of opportunity for others to be involved.
Great. Well, I might direct, and fantastic answer, I might direct it to Kate, because as sort of, being across the total program from the Victorian government perspective, she would see a variety of, sort of groups, being a part of that. So maybe you could give, give a bit of an overview of those sorts of groups.
Absolutely. Well, we're funding quite a number of community organisations, but we're also funding distributors and coalitions of businesses and retailers as well, energy retailers. So there's a lot of different types of organisations that can benefit from the neighbourhood battery model. And as Rob has alluded to, there's costs involved in installing it, but there's also profits to be made from it. So different people have different interests and different ways of covering those costs. In terms of the skills and resources that it needs, quite a few. So quite a lot of understanding of the electricity network. But one of the reasons that we've funded the Neighbourhood Battery Initiative is to answer these exact questions. So we're funding 16 projects, and it's not just to produce a feasibility study or to implement a battery. It is to provide us with constant reporting back on what they're doing and how they're doing it and why they're doing it, so that we're working with the Australian National University to put together guidelines on neighbourhood batteries, so that the very questions that you've asked, Nick, are going to be answered as an outcome of the Neighbourhood Battery Initiative. So you're going to hear this a lot from me, which is, great question, we don't know the answer yet, this project is working to solve, and this is why we're doing the trials while we're doing the feasibility studies. And Gary and Rob and Benji and Nat have the hard work of answering these questions for me, and then I've got the easy job of just sharing them afterwards. It comes up in that question of how does it need to be funded to be sustainable? Very much you need to be able to work out what is the commercial model for this. So obviously the Victorian government has funded some batteries. We can't fund every neighbourhood battery, so there needs to be a way in which how is it paid for upfront and how are those costs recovered through the sale of the energy that it generates, through the provision of network services. There are a number of ways, and it's just about balancing the books on that. And I'm sure Rob's working hard at that.
Thanks, Kate. And yeah, that's the beauty of this program. It's got innovation at the heart of it, and we're all digging deep as a community. And I would say to it's Nick Withers that's asked those fantastic questions. At the Battery Champions event that will run next year, there'll be definitely an exploration of what skills are there within the Battery Champions that turn up. And there's a number, I think we've already got about 15 or so people signed up and keen to come along to that. So we'll be going through all their skills and putting all those on the table, and all Clean Energy Nillumbic's, and seeing what's there and building from that. So that'll be a really exciting day. So I encourage you all to attend that. I'll be running it, and it'll be lots and lots of fun, I promise. Going on to the next question. Would the battery be discharged to the grid in the event of outages? So this is a technical question. So I will go to Gary on the network side, because I know he can answer this type of question.
If there's a larger scale power outage, then no, the system would not be supporting those houses which are connected to it. That's part of the safety of the electricity network we have, and there's a lot more control and communications and protection that would have to be installed in the battery system for it to work. It's not something that I dare say would be costed into this project. It's quite detailed on what's required and expensive.
Yeah, I fully agree too. Like having worked for a network, I appreciate that too. So moving on to the next question, how does it work for those of us on the 65 cents rebate for our current solar? Good question. Can I go to the Victorian government?
Personally, very jealous that you're getting 65 cents for your feed-in tariff. They've good on you for going early and dumping up the cash to put in a solar system early. Credit to you. It makes absolutely no difference. You will still receive your feed-in tariff because you're still exporting electricity to the grid, whether it goes to the grid and into the battery or goes into the grid and goes somewhere else in the network. Doesn't matter. You will still get your feed-in tariff.
Wow. So the best of all worlds. So enjoy that. Again, go to the next question. What kind of changes to the existing network infrastructure would be needed in the local area around each neighbourhood battery? Well, this is a Gary question for sure.
If you're putting a battery in, you're just picking up whoever is attached to the local low voltage network off that substation. So if you're looking at it, it may be an extra pole needs to go in. If you're putting a pole mounted unit in, it may be that the pole can't go in line with the others because it's too close to the road, because the pole mounted batteries are quite big and they may impact the traffic flow. So it depends where those items go. So there's a lot of background engineering that is required to see where the infrastructure would go, what's required to do it. And each job is an individual because no two parts of the network are the same. So each location would have to be assessed on its own merits. Sorry, it's such a vague answer, but it's very, very specific to each part of the network.
Thanks for that, Gary. And we could devote, a couple of days, I reckon, going through all of that. So I appreciate the answer. Now, I will just be sort of skipping through some of the questions. Nick Withers needs a gold medal and an Australia Day award for his questioning, and we'll try and get through as many of those as possible. And thank you so much. And I hope you do come to that Community Champions event because, there'll be a lot of value to be had there. But I will skip through and just spread the questions around a bit from here. So there's a question, does this mean places like areas of Nillumbik such as St Andrews with something like 400 dwellings with many residents on swirl lines, so they obviously know a little bit about the industry, single wire earth return lines, would not be eligible for a neighbourhood battery? I've no idea where the nearest substation is. I guess.
I answer that from an electricity infrastructure point of view. Yes, you are correct. You need a group of people attached to the substation to make the battery a net neighbourhood battery. If there's only two customers attached to a substation, which is typical in SWER areas, it's not, I would consider it not viable an infrastructure. But I'll have to hand that over to Kate and to Rob for their input.
I think that's a pretty good answer. And it just, fantastic to have such a diverse group of people on the panel to be able to get right down into the detail and, big picture as well. So thanks very much for that answer, Gary. Just moving along, just to spread the questions around. There's another one just about solar export, which we already answered. There's a question here, in a bushfire-prone area and significant bushland overlay, are these neighbourhood batteries fire safe?
Good question. I don't know. I've never seen one in action. I've not got any of the design criteria for them, so I couldn't answer that question at this point in time.
Yeah,
I could say two quick things on it. First
Yep.
of all, the areas that we're looking at don't have the bushfire management overlay. So we haven't encountered that, but we were very clear that that has to be a consideration. And now I've entirely forgotten my second point, so I might have to throw to Kate.
Any battery is flammable, so it is one of the safety considerations that needs to be taken into account when you're installing a battery. It is something that is covered under electrical safety regulation, and it's critical infrastructure. So you'd plan for it like any other critical infrastructure. You put it somewhere that is defensible. So the simple answer is yes, they do need to. It does need to be considered. They're not, batteries are relatively safe. They have a lot of features built into them to prevent fire, but that is generally fire from internal as opposed to external. So yeah, it is something that needs to be considered, and will be something that Rob is factoring in terms of consideration of placement.
Yeah, I was going to say it's something that we'd be heavily relying on Energy Safe Victoria for around as well. So.
Absolutely, good answers. I appreciate that. I'm just conscious of time too, so we, probably only have time for one or two questions. A really good question: is there a role for local councils in this? Rob, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And so obviously council have a very close relationship already with Natalie and the Clean Energy Nillumbik group. But the council are very involved in the project generally. So we do have a couple of representatives from council that are part of all of our meetings and the rest of it. And I guess we think that's really, really important in the sense that whether we need a planning permit or not, and there's all sorts of planning rules that go along with sort of stuff, but irrespective of that, we're aware that council is particularly good at understanding how their community and the streetscape needs to change, is changing, or what the constraints are in terms of propositions to change it. So that whole conversation around what is in the street at the moment, council obviously have very good understanding, have a referral authority role to play sometimes as well, but we see them as a great way to ensure that we go down this path and we find again the best place that's suitable from all sorts of different perspectives. I mean, at the last webinar we had, we kind of flagged that there's lines of sight issues here to be concerned about as well. So if they're near batteries near a T-junction, then from a transport perspective, then that potentially can be an issue. We need to be able to access the battery to maintain it. So where will that truck stop? Literally. Is it near a hill crest or something like that? There's so many of these sort of other issues that go on that it's really, really important for us and really valuable to have council involved in. So
that's fantastic. Did Kate, did you want to just add a little bit to that around council involvement that you're seeing across the projects?
Councils are very interested. So there's councils have been involved directly with a number of the applications, and there's other councils who are now approaching us saying we have residents who are interested. How should we start looking at neighbourhood batteries? So again, the guidelines that we're putting together, we very firmly have councils in mind, because either councils are looking to solve these issues themselves, or they have residents coming to them saying we want a neighbourhood battery, or we want to know more about neighbourhood batteries, and then local councils are coming to us saying, where do we find the information on this? We're getting it.
Fantastic. And it's so great to see. It's so important. And I know with Clean Energy Nillumbik, there's, strong relationships with council, involvement in the advisory group, helping out with spreading the message throughout the community, all sorts of different sort of issues being sort of collaborated together on. So yeah, that's been fantastic to see. I will like to report in late breaking news Nick Withers is saying that he is looking forward to the February event, and this has been a very informative session, and a huge thanks to all the panelists. So I would just like to echo Nick's, thank yous across the panelists and across the Clean Energy Nillumbik group for putting this on, and do a little woohoo. I can't wait to talk to Nick, and because some of the other questions he's got around prospectuses for investment.
Great. Yeah.
Oh my God, it's awesome.
This is one of the joys of this program, that we see communities really involved, and in a way that they're often not with energy questions. So it's a credit to everyone who's joined us tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks everyone sitting back in your homes who, just putting your time into this, and we promise it'll be really special, and we'll be working very hard. I'll throw back to the leader of Clean Energy Nillumbik, the very inspiring Natalie, and you can have the final words, because you absolutely deserve it, Natalie.
Thanks very much, Benji. I think that's the best intro I've ever had, so I really appreciate that. So look, I just want to echo your sentiments of thanking our panel very much. I also really want to thank all of our attendees, because as Kate highlighted, look, community engagement is so key to this project and to successful implementation of neighbourhood batteries in Nillumbik. And so, I'm sorry to cut things short now. We don't want to go over time, but we'll work on addressing those questions, perhaps putting Q&A on our website. And as Benji highlighted, there's going to be other opportunities for you all to engage. So we'll have the community champions, the Neighbourhood Battery Community Champions event coming up in February. So look forward for the date. Most of you have probably already participated in our online survey, but if you haven't, please jump onto our website and find that, and participate in our survey, and tell your friends and neighbours, so that they too can go into the draw to win a $100 voucher at Eltham Farmers Market. And we'll have a recording of this webinar on our website in the next couple of days, so you can always follow up there or share the information around that way. So thank you very much again, everybody, and looking forward to seeing you at our February event.
Thanks, everyone. See ya.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.